Today's recipe for baking sourdough bread with minimal time. A simple homemade tartine bread, as always, with step-by-step instructions. I think this bread recipe will definitely be useful for beginners. I'll be making 2 loaves of bread, one in the oven and the other, as usual, on the opposite side. We'll see the difference in the crust between them. I'll need an active wheat starter with 100% moisture. I fed it literally 3 hours ago, and now it's ready for baking. It's tripled in size and is at its peak. I've selected the starter. I add room temperature water. I dissolve the starter in the water. I add sifted flour. The flour has 10.3% protein. In my case, I use white organically grown flour. And getting ahead of myself, I can say that bread made from this flour is very tasty. It's unlike any bread made from white flour. I knead the dough until all the flour is moistened. Usually, when making tartine bread, I make 3 or 4 folds. After folding, I let it rest at room temperature for another hour and a half to 2 hours. Today we'll make just 2 folds and immediately put it into the refrigerator for cold fermentation. Next, I add olive oil and a little honey. All the ingredients and their quantities will be listed in the description below the video. I also immediately add salt and then thoroughly knead the dough. We need the salt, honey, and oil to be evenly distributed throughout the dough. This takes about 3-4 minutes. As you can see, I knead the dough in a bowl. Very convenient. In this recipe, we'll reduce the time to about 2 seconds and 12 hours. It's a quick tartine. And finally, see if this healthy and quick bread recipe suits you. I also want to mention that people constantly tell me in the comments that sourdough is also yeast. Yes, but it's natural yeast, not industrial yeast, and that makes a big difference. And then there's the long cold fermentation. You can read about it briefly in the post. The link will be in the description below the video. I gather the dough, cover it, and leave it at room temperature for half an hour. Half an hour has passed. I do the first folding of the dough. I stretch the dough out and fold it into the center, and then repeat in a circle several times until the dough becomes more elastic. If the dough is sticky, lightly moisten your hands with water. This will make it easier to work with. Next, I gather the dough into a ball, cover it again, and leave it for another 30 minutes at room temperature. Second folding. Air bubbles have already appeared in the dough. The starter is working. I lightly moisten my hands with water. I separate the dough from the sides of the bowl. I stretch the dough out again and fold it, and so on in a circle until the dough becomes more elastic. Then I gather the dough into a ball again and cover it. This was our last folding. I leave the dough for another 30 minutes. It's very simple. I don't see any difficulties here. If you're having trouble, ask in the comments. The dough is rising well, which is clearly visible. I lightly dust the dough surface and the table with flour. I transfer the dough to the table and pre-shape the loaf. I stretch and fold the dough slightly, as you see in the video. It's very simple and easy. These movements stretch the dough structure, and the air bubbles are evenly distributed within. Then I roll the dough into a roll with slight tension. I turn it over and roll it again, further strengthening the gluten. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank my channel sponsors. Friends, I'm incredibly grateful for your support. I lightly dust the dough with flour again and, using gentle circular motions, gather the dough into a hat. Cover and let the dough rest for 15-20 minutes at room temperature. Meanwhile, I flour the bread basket. I almost always use the same flour I use to make my bread. If you don't have a proofing basket, it's no problem at all. Take, for example, a bowl like this one, plastic or ceramic, any kind. Just don't make it too wide, or the bread will spread. The narrower the pan, the less the bread will spread. Next, I turn the dough over and shape it into a loaf. I fold one side of the dough, take one edge from the side, fold it over, and fold it over with the other side. Twist it with a little tension, turn the dough over, and pinch the edges. Place the dough in the proofing basket. Sprinkle a little flour on top of the dough and cover it with a plastic bag. Secure the bag with a rubber band to prevent the dough from drying out in the refrigerator. Then I immediately put the dough in the refrigerator to proof for 12-14 hours without warmth at room temperature. Adjust the time to suit your schedule, but I recommend refrigerating for at least 8 hours. This is the second loaf, which I made simultaneously but didn't show the dough. It's exactly the same as the first loaf. I transferred it to a proofing basket, sprinkled it with flour, covered it with a plastic bag, and also put it in the refrigerator for cold fermentation. Let me remind you that I will be baking this loaf on the countertop, and the first loaf in a cauldron. We will then compare the crust on the bread in the cauldron and without. It's been 14 hours. I took the dough out of the refrigerator. My refrigerator temperature is 5 degrees Celsius. I dust the dough with a little flour and transfer it to a parchment-lined baking sheet. I dust it with more flour. This makes it easier to apply the design. I'll make a light design on this loaf to make it a little more elegant. Using a rope like this, I'll punch stripes in the dough as a guide for the design and make cuts with a blade. Next, I make a major cut in the center of the bread and place it in the preheated oven. Bake on steam for the first 15 minutes. As a reminder, all the ingredients and the baking temperature are in the description below the video. Now, I take out the second loaf. It's also been refrigerated for 14 hours. The temperature is 5 degrees Celsius. I transfer it to a baking sheet. I take out the preheated cauldron to 250 degrees Celsius. I make a cut across the bread surface. I transfer the dough into the cauldron, cover with a lid, and place it in the preheated oven. Bake for 20 minutes. Remove the lid, lower the temperature, and bake for another 15-20 minutes until golden brown. I take the fragrant bread out of the oven and let it cool. And look at that crust. It's all bubbles and so thin, more tender. As a reminder, this bread has 2 folds and doesn't have any warmth. A quick option. A dull, wonderful sound means the bread is perfectly baked. The bread is crispy, aromatic, with a thin crust, and very healthy. And here's the second example. Without a cauldron, baked on a regular baking sheet. The crust is also very crispy, a little rougher, but still quite good. So this is an excellent option, and you decide for yourself what's more important to you. So in a cauldron, we get a thinner and more tender crust. Without a cauldron, it's a little rougher. That's the only difference. But if the crust is too rough for you, you can cover the bread with a towel for about 30 minutes after baking. It will soften a little. Look how smooth the crumb is. And the taste of the bread is incomparable.